The history of the Middle East as we know it is carved in stone with dates of falls and conquests. 1187, the Battle of Hattin, the loss of Jerusalem. 1291, the fall of Acre, when the last Crusader ships left the Levant, leaving behind 2 centuries of attempts to gain a foothold in the Holy Land. In textbooks, this is presented as an inevitable outcome. The foreign European element was rejected by the vast Islamic world, deprived of resources and people. The Kingdom of Jerusalem remained in memory as a romantic but doomed adventure. But this inevitability is only an illusion of hindsight. The Crusader states controlled key maritime trade hubs, possessed advanced fortification technologies, and had access to Europe's demographic resources. Their collapse was the result not so much of external forces as of internal fragmentation and a fatal quarrel with their only natural ally in the region, the Byzantine Empire. What if, at the end of the 12th century, political logic had prevailed over feudal ambitions? Let's imagine a scenario where, instead of confrontation, the West and Byzantium find a formula for symbiosis, where Jerusalem remains not just a religious symbol, but becomes an impregnable bastion, supported by the gold of Constantinople and the fleets of Venice. This is a world where the Mediterranean Sea does not divide civilizations, but connects them into a single economic hub. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the history of the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the entire Middle East could have changed. To understand the mechanism of future changes, we need to take a close look at a map from the 1170s. A map where every principality, every port, and every road has political significance. The Crusader states, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli, and the Principality of Antioch, stretched out in a narrow, almost fragile strip along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. It was not a full-fledged region, but rather a coastal bridgehead, dependent on the sea as much as a person depends on air. Their strength lay in their control of the trade gateways of the Levant, Acre, Tyre, Jaffa, through which flowed an endless river of wealth, spices, silk, indigo, glass, incense. All of this, transported to Europe, made the cities the richest transit points of the entire Middle Ages. But beneath the outward glamour lay a heavy strategic curse. These states were narrow strips of land, lacking strategic depth, unable to absorb or survive a serious blow. Any army that broke through the coastline found itself immediately at the walls of the capitals. On their eastern border stood a growing power. First Nur ad-Din, then Saladin, who step by step united Damascus, Aleppo, and Egypt into a single military fist. The Franks, as all Europeans were called in the east, understood that they were facing not just an enemy, but a state project that surpassed them in numbers, resources, and strategic unity. The main problem for the Crusaders was demographics, and this should not be underestimated. The ruling Latin class was a tiny minority among the huge population of local Christians, Greeks, Armenians, Maronites, Jews, and Muslims. The military core of the kingdom was tiny. In its best years, Jerusalem could field 15,000–20,000 soldiers with full mobilization, a laughable figure compared to the armies of neighboring states. Reinforcements from Europe arrived irregularly, and each defeated contingent was lost forever. The local population, although often loyal to the Franks, could not completely fill the personnel gap. The Latin East was besieged not only by geography, but also by politics. The main chance for long-term survival was an alliance with the Byzantine Empire, the only power capable of compensating for their weaknesses. Byzantium was the superpower of its time, with resources, a fleet, an army, and experience in governing multinational territories. Emperor Manuel I Komnenos pursued a persistent policy of rapprochement, offering the Crusaders a protectorate, gold, engineers, and military corps. He saw the Levant not as a rival, but as a buffer, vital for the preservation of Anatolia. But mistrust, mutual animosity, and political short-sightedness turned the negotiations into a farce. The Latins considered the Greeks cunning and unreliable, while the Greeks despised the Latins for their rudeness, fanaticism, and desire to interfere in Byzantine affairs. The religious schism between Catholics and Orthodox Christians only widened the gap. The greed of some barons who sought independence and did not want to allow Byzantine officials onto their lands ultimately destroyed any attempts at unification. As a result, the Crusaders were left alone at a time when isolation was a death sentence. Their armies were defeated one by one. Their ports, once the richest in the world, found themselves isolated. Their fortresses, however powerful they were, could not withstand a siege without outside support. Thus, the well-known ending came to pass. But it was not a foregone conclusion. History could have taken a different turn literally half a step before the catastrophe if fear of Saladin had outweighed pride and political reason had outweighed feudal ambitions. Let us imagine that in 1180, realizing the growing threat from Saladin, the Regency Council of the ailing King Baldwin IV made a pragmatic decision. Instead of relying on unreliable adventurers from Europe, Jerusalem concludes an eternal peace with Constantinople. This is not just a treaty, but a dynastic and military union. The Byzantine fleet receives bases in Acre and Tyre, and in return, the empire undertakes to finance the construction of fortifications and, most importantly, provides contingents of professional mercenary infantry. The Fourth Crusade, which in our reality plundered Constantinople in 1204, takes on a different purpose here. Thanks to the coordination of the Pope and the Emperor, the energy of European knighthood is directed not toward the destruction of Byzantium, but toward the strengthening of the Levant. The Antioch Pact creates a unified defense system. When Saladin begins his offensive, he encounters not scattered feudal forces, but a united army, heavy Frankish cavalry supported by Byzantine engineering corps and Greek infantry. The Battle of Hattin either did not happen at all or ended in a tactical draw. Jerusalem remained under Christian control. Saladin, tied up fighting on two fronts against the Crusaders and internal enemies in Mosul, was forced to sign a long-term truce, recognizing the status quo. The basis for the survival of the Latin East is not miraculous salvation, but harsh logistics and engineering. The state gradually ceases to be a collection of disparate feudal estates and transforms into a unified fortification system designed to function under conditions of constant threat. The Franks understand that it is not the strongest in a single battle who survives, but those who are able to withstand a grueling, years-long war of attrition. That is why the priority shifts from nightly exploits to the cold, rational construction of infrastructure. A stone network. Since human resources are always in short supply, the focus is on stone and geometry. The experience of building giants such as Crec de Chevalier is expanding and improving. Fortresses are turning into standardized defense nodes. A keep, double walls, a system of water collectors, and supply depots for several months. The border with the desert is transformed into an echelon line of defense, where each fortress is within sight of the next, forming a chain of observation. A system of light signals, borrowed from Byzantium, allowed warnings to be transmitted faster than a messenger could deliver them. This allowed small garrisons to hold back large armies until the main forces arrived, and sometimes even avoid battle altogether by negating the element of surprise. At the same time, communication between fortresses improved. New roads were built, suitable for the rapid movement of troops and supply trains. Stone bridges replaced rickety wooden crossings, reducing dependence on the season. Important supply points, wells, cisterns, mills, were fortified and placed under guard. The Latin East was transformed into a space where every hill and every ravine was of strategic importance and subject to a common defensive logic. Fleet and supplies. The Italian maritime republics, Venice, Genoa, Pisa, receive unprecedented tax breaks and trade privileges. In exchange, they are obliged to maintain constant maritime communication, effectively forming a maritime conveyor belt. Merchant ships became both a means of transport for military reinforcements and an element of intelligence. Captains were obliged to report on all movements of Muslim fleets and caravans. The Levant became an unsinkable aircraft carrier. Even under a complete blockade from land, port cities continued to receive grain, timber, weapons, craftsmen, and, at critical moments, entire contingents of auxiliary troops. Specialized naval shipyards gradually took shape. Harbors protected from storms and attacks were built in Acre and Tyre. The Italians brought dry dock technology, which sped up fleet repairs and allowed more ships to stay at sea. As a result, even large Muslim armies were unable to organize a full blockade. Without dominance at sea, their sieges turned into costly and useless campaigns. Standardization of the army. Pure feudal freemen are abandoned. Latin knights remain the elite, but become part of a more disciplined and structured military machine. Under the influence of Byzantium, regular pay, accounting, compulsory service for urban communities, and a system of inspections are introduced. The unification of weapons and tactics begins. Shields and spears are standardized, and training is conducted according to common rules. A hybrid type of troops appears, the Turcopoles. These are no longer scattered auxiliary units, but a massive organized force. The Turcopoles combine the skills of nomadic composite bow shooting with European discipline. They are capable of patrolling the desert, guarding caravans, blocking the maneuvers of Muslim light cavalry, and providing mobile reconnaissance. The nightly battering ram remains a super weapon for decisive moments. But the basis of warfare is maneuver, defensive combat, and the correct distribution of forces. Military reform also affected the orders. The Templars and Hospitallers became not only elite fighters, but also engineers, administrators, and builders of roads and fortresses. Their commanders began to draw up maps of the terrain, create supply storage systems, and teach garrisons the basics of siege warfare. The army no longer reacted to threats in a chaotic manner. It acted as a single mechanism. Together, these reforms transformed the Latin East into a military machine capable of withstanding pressure from superior forces. It became not a random colony of adventurous knights, but a fully fledged defensive organism built on the principles of rationality, planning, and long-term survival. The preservation of Jerusalem and the coastal strip radically changed the economic geography of the 13th century. The Levant did not become a zone of constant war, but rather the Switzerland of the Middle Ages, a neutral zone of trade guaranteed by military force. The endpoints of the Great Silk Road are now firmly in Latin hands. Caravans from Baghdad and Damascus are forced to go to the ports of Acre and Tyre, as this is the shortest route to European silver. Instead of robbing the caravans, the Crusaders begin to guard them, collecting tolls. The early agricultural revolution begins. The Franks actively borrow irrigation and cultivation technologies from the Arabs. Sugarcane plantations, the famous Cyprus sugar, but now also Palestinian, become the oil of the time. The glassworks of Tyre and Sidon, using local sand in European markets, create a monopoly on high-quality glass. Economic prosperity attracted migrants. Not only knights, but also craftsmen, merchants, and peasants from overpopulated Europe, as well as Eastern Christians, Armenians, Maronites, who saw the kingdom as a refuge, flocked to the cities of the Levant. Let us imagine for a moment the social evolution of this society. By the 14th century, the division between conquerors and locals was gradually disappearing, giving way to new forms of interaction. By the end of the 13th century, the first signs of mixed communities could be observed, where the children of Frankish knights, Italian merchants, and local Christians grew up side by side, forming their own cultural code. Gradually, a new ethnocultural community was formed, the Poulains, for whom the dividing lines of the Old World became archaic. These were people of mixed blood who moved freely between several cultures. They spoke lingua franca, a flexible, living language that was a mixture of Old French, Italian dialects, Greek and Arabic, with elements of Syrian and Armenian words. Their everyday clothing is adapted to the climate of the Levant: loose robes, thin linen shirts, leather sandals and turbans to protect them from the sun. Their way of life also reflects this synthesis. They wash in hammams, according to Eastern tradition, use not only European but also Middle Eastern spices in their cooking, and their homes feature Latin crucifixes alongside Byzantine-style mosaics. Religious practices are also gradually changing. The Polani pray in Latin or according to the Greek rite, but their services are now accompanied by the scent of incense from Aleppo, the chants of Middle Eastern Christianity, and a more relaxed attitude towards a number of rituals. Even the churches themselves became evidence of cultural mixing. European pointed arches were combined with Eastern carvings, and the domes were decorated with frescoes painted by masters from the Syrian and Greek communities. The legal system also underwent a profound transformation. The High Chamber, the Court of Barons, retained its role for the feudal nobility, but as cities grew, numerous mixed courts appeared. Byzantine Roman law, which provided detailed regulation of contracts and property, was actively adapted to govern trade and urban life. Maritime law, inherited from the Italians, the Genoese, Venetians, and Pisans, forms the basis for regulating port activities, cargo guarantees, insurance, and loans. All this makes the Kingdom of Jerusalem one of the most legally complex societies of its time. The social structure became less rigid. The Poulains worked as translators, notaries, minor officials, merchants, and mercenaries, forming new classes and craft guilds. Their bilingualism, and often trilingualism or quadrilingualism, made them indispensable intermediaries in trade and diplomacy. Even European knights arriving from France or Germany are often forced to marry women from local communities in order to gain access to networks of acquaintances, land, or craft connections. The religious intolerance of the early Crusades gradually gave way to pragmatic coexistence. Muslim merchants were given their own quarters and mosques in port cities because the trade in spices, sugar, fabrics, and glass brought in huge profits. Eastern Christian communities, Maronites, Armenians, Syrians, Copts, held important positions in cities and acted as intermediaries between rural areas and the royal administration. Within Christianity itself, a forced but gradual rapprochement takes place. Faced with powerful Islamic states, Catholics and Orthodox Christians in the Levant de facto overcome the Great Schism at the grassroots level. Churches hold liturgies in which Latin and Greek elements merge, and local customs become part of the sacred ritual. This gives rise to unique syncretic forms of worship that differ from both Western and Eastern counterparts. Religion ceases to be a factor of rigid division and becomes a cultural marker of a hybrid society that strives for stability in order to retain the wealth of the Levant. Thus, a new civilization gradually takes shape, the Latin East, unlike either Europe or the Islamic world, but incorporating elements of both and becoming a unique borderland culture. The middle of the 13th century brought a terrible storm, the Mongol invasion. In real history, the Mongols destroyed Baghdad and Damascus, but were stopped by the Mamluks of Egypt at Ain Jalut in 1260 as the Crusaders took a passive position. In our reality, the powerful Kingdom of Jerusalem becomes a natural ally of the Ilkhanate, the Mongol state in Persia. A full-fledged military alliance, which was dreamed of in reality, takes place. Latin heavy cavalry and Mongolian mounted archers act together. The Egyptian Mamluks find themselves surrounded. They cannot expand northward. The Islamic world is divided. Egypt remains a powerful but isolated center. The center of Islamic civilization shifts. Baghdad recovers more quickly under Mongol protection, but the vectors of jihad change. Instead of fighting for the Mediterranean, the energy of Islam is directed deeper into Africa and eastward to India and Indonesia, much more intensely and earlier. The Ottoman Empire as we know it does not come into being. The Turkic Beyliks in Anatolia are squeezed between a strong Byzantium, which survives thanks to logistical support from the West, and the Mongols. Constantinople does not fall in 1453. The eastern Mediterranean remains a Christian lake. By the 15th century, the Latin corridor becomes a center of intellectual exchange. It is here, and not only in Italy, that the Renaissance begins. Arab scholars and Byzantine philosophers fleeing the Mongols find refuge in the universities of Acre and Jerusalem, where their works are immediately translated into Latin. The architecture of the Levant gave birth to a unique style, Levantine Gothic. The pointed arches of cathedrals were decorated with oriental carvings and mosaics, and fortresses were built according to ancient geometry. Trade changes the world beyond the region. Since the spice route is securely controlled by Christians and duties are stable, but high, the Portuguese and Spanish have less incentive to seek a detour around Africa or across the Atlantic so desperately. The age of discovery may be delayed by 50-100 years or follow a different scenario, not as a search for a route to India, but as pure colonization. Venice and Genoa did not decline, but transformed into transnational corporations that controlled the finances of the entire region. Jerusalem became the banking capital of the world, where the treasures of the orders, the Templars and Hospitallers, were kept, which had become powerful financial and industrial groups. Let us imagine ourselves in the 20th or 21st century. The map of the Middle East is unrecognizable. Instead of a mosaic of post-colonial Arab states, the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea is home to the state of Outremer, or the Jerusalem Federation. This entity is the result of centuries of evolution, blending Latin, Greek, and Middle Eastern traditions while maintaining a stability unattainable for many of its neighbors. Its political institutions grew out of medieval city communes that transformed into a modern parliamentary system where religious groups have guaranteed quotas that prevent the monopolization of power. It is a secular, multi-confessional state, reminiscent of modern Lebanon, but the size of Syria and Israel combined, and much more stable and wealthy. Its economy is based on transit trade, financial services, and a high-tech sector that grew out of the old tradition of banking operations of the Teutonic Order and the merchant houses of Venice. The official language is a descendant of that very Franco-Levantine pidgin, a Latinized language with many Semitic and Greek roots. It has become not only a means of communication, but also a symbol of cultural synthesis, noticeable in literature, theater, and even street architecture. The daily life of the inhabitants of Outremer reflects centuries of intertwined traditions. Western European educational institutions coexist with Eastern craft schools, and family structures combine elements of Latin law, Byzantine canon, and local community codes. In cities such as Jerusalem and Tyre, there are buildings in which Gothic arches are combined with Moorish tiles and Byzantine domes, forming a unique architectural language characteristic only of this region. Byzantium, the Greek Empire, survived as a compact nation-state in Asia Minor and Greece, similar to modern-day Turkey, but Christian and European. Over the centuries, it underwent its own modernization, transforming from a medieval power into a constitutional monarchy or republic, depending on the scenario, actively cooperating with Outremer and Europe. A high-speed ferry and airline service operates between Constantinople and Accra, emphasizing the ancient but renewed north-south axis. The Islamic world, deprived of its centuries-old dominance in this region, has other centers of power, possibly in Persia or North Africa. Cairo remains an important cultural hub, but its influence is shifting southward rather than eastward. The Arabian Peninsula is developing its own path to modernization without entering into direct conflict with the Christian Eastern Mediterranean. This creates a more multipolar system where ideological confrontation gives way to economic competition. Globally, the absence of the Ottoman Empire, which had blocked trade between Europe and Asia, led to a more even development of Eurasia. Europe was not cut off from the East, and technological exchange continued uninterrupted. The universities of the Mediterranean became intermediaries between Arab, Persian, and European thought, maintaining their role as an intellectual bridge. The region's numerous medical and engineering schools inherited a rich Arab-Greek scientific tradition and became an alternative to the Italian universities of the Renaissance. The East-West conflict as we know it did not develop, as there was a buffer zone of mixed culture. Instead of a rigid civilizational divide, there were crossover zones, where religions and languages coexisted without the need for constant border revisions. In such a scenario, the Middle East of the 20th and 21st centuries would have been less militarized, less prone to imperialist intervention, and more focused on trade and technological development than on the struggle for resources or the influence of great powers. Let us compare the known outcome with a possible alternative. In our history, the loss of the Holy Land led to the isolation of Europe, the search for detours, and, ultimately, to colonialism, born out of the need to bypass the hostile Islamic barrier. In the scenario under consideration, the preservation of a narrow strip of land along the sea prevented the isolation of Europe. The union of the cross and the Byzantine eagle could have created a sustainable security architecture that would have lasted for centuries. The Latin East could have become not just an episode in religious wars, but a bridge where the synthesis of cultures would have taken place 500 years before globalization. This is a story about how diplomacy and logistics could have proved stronger than fanaticism. Subscribe so you don't miss new versions of history.